Say goodbye to your rank and your reputation. I've seen karma come for people before, but never like this. These two guys, both Navy petty officers, thought they were untouchable. They strutted around like they owned the place, barking orders and treating their rank like a license to bully. And for a while, they got away with it. They pushed people around, broke rules without blinking, and made life hell for anyone who didn't fit their narrow view of what a sailor should be. But then they made one fatal mistake. They went after my friend Bill, and that was the beginning of the end. They mocked him, humiliated him, and pushed him to the brink. What they didn't realize was that when Bill finally broke, someone much higher up noticed, and she was not the type to let it go. She wore rank that could end careers with a single conversation, and she was furious. Not just disappointed, not just upset. Furious. That quiet kind of fury that doesn't burn out. It gets results. In the end, those two petty officers lost everything. Their jobs, their benefits, their housing, their reputations. One of them was just 2 years away from a full military retirement. Gone. The other had more than a decade in the Navy. Gone. And I was there to see every moment of it unfold. Every punishment, every consequence, every ounce of justice. They thought they were powerful, but they underestimated how fast power can vanish when it's built on cruelty. And when someone with real power decides to make things right, you don't just lose your rank. You lose your future. I met Bill during boot camp, and we stuck together, all the way through A school, what the Navy calls job training. Right away, it was clear Bill wasn't your stereotypical sailor. He wasn't the type to bark orders or lift heavy like a gym rat. He was short, a bit round in the middle, and always had these slightly crooked glasses perched on his nose, but that never bothered me. In fact, that's what made him stand out. What really defined Bill was his mind. The guy was sharp, analytical, focused, and freakishly good with anything technical. He was the kind of person who could explain sonar systems to you in a way that actually made sense. That's rare. The Navy had slotted him to be a sonar technician, and honestly, they couldn't have picked a better person for the job. I've met people who get by with charm, or brute strength, or just knowing how to work the system. Bill didn't rely on any of that. He earned his way with sheer competence and grit. We became close during those months. It wasn't just shared classes or routines. It was the long nights, the mental pressure, and the way everyone around us seemed to be putting on a mask to survive. Bill didn't do that. He stayed real, even when things got tough. He had this quiet resilience, like he'd already been through worse and knew how to keep going. And honestly, that made him one of the few people I trusted. Now here's the thing about a school. It's not just about learning a job. It's where they start breaking you in, testing your limits, figuring out who's going to fold under pressure. Most of our instructors understood that balance, but there were two guys in particular who didn't just push. They crushed. And unfortunately, they had Bill in their sights. Our A school was meant to shape us into technical specialists, people who could manage sonar systems, track submarines, and handle the kind of tech that could win or lose wars. You'd think the focus would be on brains, not brawn. But our instructors, both petty officers, had different ideas. They acted like we were gearing up to join Navy SEALs instead of operating sonar. These guys were obsessed with fitness, discipline, and control. And they weren't just strict. They were cruel. They'd get this smug look on their faces when they found someone they could push around. And unfortunately for Bill, he became their favorite target. It didn't matter that Bill met every required fitness standard. He passed all the tests. But because he wasn't running 5 miles a day or bench pressing his body weight, they labeled him as weak. They ridiculed him constantly. In front of the class, in private, it didn't matter. They called him lazy, worthless, and worse. I remember hearing one of them tell him straight-faced, "You don't belong in the Navy. You should just do everyone a favor and disappear." At first, Bill tried to laugh it off. He'd smile awkwardly, shake it off, and just try harder. That was his way. Quiet determination. But you could see the pressure building. These weren't just jabs during training. They were daily attacks on his worth. And no matter how well he did in class or how much effort he gave, it was never enough for them. They made an example out of him, and the rest of us noticed. It created this tension in the room. Like if you didn't fall in line, you could be next. We all felt it, but Bill lived it. And it only got worse once he got injured. It started with his knee. Bill had been pushing himself harder than anyone. Should have had to. Trying to outrun the insults, trying to prove he deserved to be there. He didn't say much about the pain at first. That was just Bill. He didn't want to be seen as complaining. But eventually, it got bad enough that he went to medical. The doc confirmed it. Strained ligaments. Nothing career-ending, but serious enough that he was placed on light duty, officially, with paperwork. He showed the paperwork to the petty officers, thinking that'd be the end of it. He followed the proper chain of command, played by the book. But instead of respecting that, they turned it into another weapon. They accused him of faking it, said he was just trying to get out of PT, and they made it crystal clear. If he didn't show up and work out with the rest of the class, injured knee or not, they'd start the process to kick him out of the Navy. Bill was stuck. Obey the doctor, and risk losing his future, or disobey medical orders and destroy his body. So he did the only thing he thought he could. He pushed through. Every run, every squat, every drill sent a bolt of pain through his knee, and with every step, his mental state slipped further. What made it worse was that he had nowhere to go. Back then, mental health in the Navy wasn't something you talked about. There were no therapists, no open conversations. If you were struggling, your only real option was the chaplain, the religious officer on base. Ours was a kind, soft-spoken woman who always made time for people. She wasn't just respected, she was trusted. Bill finally made the choice to meet with her. He needed someone to talk to. He needed something, anything, that felt like support. And for a moment, it seemed like he'd found a path forward. But when he told the petty officers that he'd be missing class for the meeting, they exploded. They mocked him worse than ever before, called him soft, told him he was wasting everyone's time. They said no one cared about his problems, that the chaplain wouldn't do anything, and that if he went through with the meeting, things would only get worse. They leaned on him hard. And tragically, it worked. Bill canceled the meeting. Later that night, his girlfriend dumped him. She said she couldn't handle the long-distance thing anymore. Maybe that would have been a blow he could have handled on its own. But after weeks, months, of relentless pressure, something inside him snapped. At 3 a.m., my phone rang. It was Bill. I answered, half asleep, expecting a drunk call, but there was nothing. Just silence. I called his name. I asked if he was okay. No answer. I figured maybe it was a butt dial. Maybe he passed out drunk. I hung up and went back to bed. I still regret that decision. The next morning, everything changed. Bill's ex-girlfriend, yes, the one who had just broken up with him, started frantically calling everyone in our circle. Her voice was shaking. She told us Bill was in the hospital. He had tried to take his own life. He had slit his own throat. My blood ran cold. That 3 a.m. call, it hadn't been a drunk dial. He'd called me. He'd called several of us as he was bleeding out, unable to speak, maybe hoping someone would pick up and realize what was happening. But none of us did. By some miracle, the cold night air slowed the bleeding just enough. The blood clotted externally, forming a kind of seal that kept him alive long enough for someone to find him. The doctors said he missed a major artery by about a millimeter. A millimeter. We rushed to the hospital as soon as we could. When we arrived, we passed the chaplain in the hallway. I will never forget her face. This gentle, soft-spoken woman, the one who always smiled, always greeted you with warmth, looked like she could burn a hole through steel with her stare. I had never seen rage like that before. It wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, focused, controlled, and lethal. She stopped for just a moment to tell us that Bill was going to be okay, and then she said something I'll never forget. I won't let this go. That's when I knew. Those petty officers had no idea what they'd just unleashed. When we saw Bill, he could barely speak. But he was alive. He was shaken, scared, but grateful. He told us everything. How he felt backed into a corner. How the pressure never let up. How he truly believed that no one cared, and that even trying to talk to the chaplain would be seen as weakness. Those two men had taken someone who just needed help and made him believe he didn't deserve it. And yet, despite it all, he survived. He was still here, and justice was coming. For a week, everything was eerily quiet. The petty officers still showed up like nothing had happened, still barking orders, still carrying that smugness like their uniforms made them untouchable. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. We could feel it. Then one morning, we got pulled aside, me and a few of Bill's closest friends, by the chief of the training command. He told us he wanted to check in, make sure we were okay. On the surface, it sounded like routine protocol, but it wasn't. There was something behind his words, like he was waiting to hear something specific. Like he already knew the truth, but wanted it confirmed, so we told him. I talked about how months earlier, those two petty officers had set me up for a verbal chewing by the chain of command, completely based on a lie. My friends chimed in with their own stories. Times they were targeted. Times those guys stepped over the line, berated someone in front of the class, used fear and humiliation like it was part of the lesson plan. The chief just nodded, occasionally jotting things down, but deep down, I think he already had everything he needed. This wasn't about building a case. This was about loading the last few rounds into a cannon that had already been aimed. The very next day, both petty officers were gone. No warning. No goodbyes. Just vanished. When we walked into class that morning, two completely new instructors were waiting for us. One of them smiled and said, "We'll be taking over your training from here on out." No further explanation, no questions allowed. But we didn't need answers. We knew exactly what had happened. Still, I needed to hear it from the source. So after class, I found the chaplain. She didn't sugarcoat it. She told me she had gone straight to the admiral who oversaw the entire base. She didn't file a complaint. She didn't go through channels. She made a demand. And the admiral listened. Both petty officers were to be dishonorably discharged, immediately. She teared up as she told me. She wasn't crying for them. She was crying because Bill hadn't gotten to her in time. Because in her mind, she had failed him. She blamed herself for not being more aggressive earlier, for not recognizing just how close to the edge he'd been. But now she was making it right. Dishonorable discharge. In civilian life, that might sound like a bad line on your resume. In the military, it's a life sentence. It means no benefits, no pension, no housing, no health care, no respect. And it follows you everywhere. Those two petty officers lost it all. They were kicked out of their base housing the same day. No time to prepare, no time to pack. Just gone. One of them had nearly 18 years in the Navy, 2 years away from retirement. The other had 12. Both were in the prime of their careers, just counting the days to lifetime benefits. And just like that, it vanished. Their careers, their reputations, everything they'd built, erased with one decision from someone who'd had enough. And it didn't stop there. When you're discharged like that, you don't get help relocating. You get one bus ticket. One. Not for your spouse, not for your kids, not for your belongings. Just you. Wherever home is. Figure it out. And good luck getting a job. Dishonorable discharge bars you from working with any company that holds Department of Defense contracts. That's not just shipyards or defense firms. That includes fast food chains like McDonald's, Taco Bell, Subway, any brand with a presence on military bases. They won't touch you. Legally, they can't. So, whatever image these two had of bouncing back, rebuilding, maybe getting a civilian job in security or training, gone. They weren't just fired. They were exiled. And here's the part that stuck with me the most. There were no loud explosions. No dramatic confrontations, just silence. The kind of silence that comes when someone in power makes a phone call and ends your whole world in 5 minutes. That's what real justice looks like in the military. You don't always see it coming, but when it hits, it leaves nothing standing. While those two were being stripped of everything they thought made them powerful, Bill was beginning the long road back to himself. He was medically discharged from the Navy, honorably. It wasn't the ending he'd planned for, but it was the one he desperately needed. That discharge came with E5 pay for life, full benefits, counseling services back home, already set up and covered. Everything the Navy could offer to help him heal, they gave it to him. And for once, it felt like they got something right. I kept in touch with Bill for a while after he left. We'd trade texts, talk about life back home, check in here and there. Slowly, you could see the weight lifting off him. No more forced marches. No more being shamed for not fitting into someone else's mold. He had space to breathe again, and he used it. The last time I checked, Bill had become a police officer. He'd gotten married, found peace, built something solid for himself, not because he was trying to prove anything, but because he finally had the chance to live without fear hanging over him. I think about that sometimes, the difference between how things could have gone and how they actually ended. If Bill had been just 1 millimeter closer to that artery, if the chaplain hadn't seen him in that hospital bed, if someone with real power hadn't cared enough to act. But that's the thing. Sometimes the right person steps in at the right time. Sometimes the people who think they're untouchable get crushed under the weight of their own cruelty. And sometimes justice comes wearing the quietest voice in the room and carrying the biggest hammer. I never found out what happened to those two petty officers after they were kicked out. And honestly, I don't care. I imagine they ended up bouncing from job to job, maybe lying on applications, dodging questions about their discharge, trying to explain away a career that ended in disgrace. But wherever they are, I hope they wake up every morning knowing exactly why they lost everything. I hope they remember the face of the kid they pushed too far, and the woman in uniform who made sure they paid for it. As for Bill, I don't pretend to know every struggle he still faces. But I do know this. He got another shot, a real one, and he made something of it. While those two bullies lost their rank, their benefits, and their reputations, Bill gained something they'll never have. Peace. And me? I got to watch it all unfold. I got to see real justice delivered. Not through fists or screaming matches, but through quiet authority and relentless determination, the kind that doesn't just punish, it ends careers. In the end, the ones who screamed the loudest were silenced, and the one they tried to destroy walked away stronger.
The case has been heard. The stories have been told. Now it's your turn to judge. Leave your verdict in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. The Court of Stories is always in session.